Good morning, Lisbon. It's a great pleasure to be here. I have a really fun topic to talk to you about today. I think many of you will know the book Lean Startup, which I think was one of the most helpful startup books in getting us to understand the importance of product market fit. But one of the things that I think is unfortunate about that book is that it would lead you to believe that as soon as you found product market fit, you're ready to hit the gas and start scaling your startup. And that will work fine in the business-to-consumer space, but if you're doing a B2B startup, what you typically find is that it doesn't work, and if you start scaling sales, you actually don't get very much results from it, and you run into a lot of problems around burning a lot of cash very quickly. And the reason for that, I believe, is that there is an important missing step, and I call that step the search for a repeatable, scalable, and profitable growth model. And that's what we want to talk about today and give you that broken down into a series of stages here. So a great question that I like to have front and center in every board meeting that I go to is a great way for us to maybe start getting introduced to this topic. And that question, I believe every one of you should be very focused on because it's crucial for your survival, is when will we run out of cash? And will we be in a position to raise capital when we do run out of cash? Will we have hit the right milestones needed for a successful fundraise? So to bring that to the fore, I like to see this slide in every board deck, which shows when you will run out of cash. And then it's useful to remember that you're going to need 3 months before that to start fundraising. So that's the time when you need to have hit the milestone for a successful fundraise. Now, once founders realize that they have so little time, many of them start to realize that they thought they had a lot of time after they raised so much capital, but it's nothing like the time they thought. And so they have a real race against time. And the only way to win that race is to have very extreme focus in your business and real alignment across every department. So how do you focus your team? What should you align them on? Well, I think since survival is important, we can focus everybody around this milestone that is needed to successfully close your next round. So some of you might have seen the concept that your startup valuation simply increases as a matter of how long you've been in business. So maybe you raised your last round 12 months ago. Should your startup valuation have increased automatically because it was 12 months ago? Well, the answer is no. It only increases when you hit certain milestones. And the milestones is really about how you de-risk the elements in your business. And so startup value changes as you de-risk key things. And the very first thing to de-risk is getting through the founding phase of testing your hypothesis. Who are you going to sell to, and what are you going to build and sell to them, and will they want to buy that? Once you've done that, you then want to actually prove that you've got a product that works and that the customers love. Once you've done that, you move on to showing that somebody's actually going to be willing to pay for that. And then at that next stage, will many people pay for that? Each of these steps, these milestones, unlocks higher valuations as it's a de-risking of your business for you. And let me show you the remaining steps here which are required. So once we've shown that many people will pay, we now need to prove that we can take an ordinary salesperson, not a founder who's treated in a very special way by the customer, and have them successfully able to sell. And once we've done that, we then want to be able to show that we can scale how many salespeople we're using, increase the rate at which we're growing without running into problems. And then what we've seen is that many times as you start to scale, you run into customer churn problems, so you have to go back and fix. Can you scale without excessively churning customers and keep every customer happy? And then lastly, we're going to show the importance of profitability because that's really key for how you create value in your company. So it's the stage of proving that you can grow and also at the same time head towards a profitable milestone. So these milestones are what I'm going to talk about today. These are the secrets to success, if you like, that are on my talk here. So what's very interesting about these milestones is that not only do they change the value of your startup, but they also change the focus and the business motion, the things that you do in your startup as you go from one of these stages to the next stage. So what you're going to hear me talking about today is the concept of how important it is to recognize where you are and to stay and complete that stage. And I'm going to give you exit criteria that tell you when you're ready to move on to the next stage. And it's important not to move forward before you've done that. I have made so many mistakes in my life as an entrepreneur that I'm trying to help you avoid by helping with this particular advice here. So these moments here lead to what I call subphases, and let me quickly walk you through the subphases. In product market fit, the subphase, the first one would be testing your hypothesis, and then proving the value by proving that it actually works, and then proving that you can get somebody to actually purchase one version of your product. And this is well covered, so I'm not going to go into this area, but what is less well covered is this area, and this is where I will spend my time. So here, we want to start off by figuring out a repeatable way to sell our product, and I'll spend a lot of time on that for you. Once we've done that, this will typically be done by the founders. We then need to prove that non-founders can repeat that same motion that was working for the founders. And then we want to try to make it scale, and then we need to fix customer success and then make it profitable. So once you've done that, you enter the great phase where you're ready to hit the gas and start scaling and accelerating. And there are other phases after this, like when should you expand internationally, when should you add additional products, but I'm not going to cover those because they're for a much further stage on. So what's cool here is that when you do finish these 9 stages and get to repeatable, scalable, and profitable growth, your company valuation is going to start to accelerate at a very rapid rate. And you might ask the reason, well, why is that the case? Well, the answer is that I chose these 3 words very, very carefully. So repeatable tells me that you know how to repeat this thing that you're doing. Scalable tells me that you know how to make it grow as much as you want to. And profitable tells me that it's a very good thing to do because we make money every time we do it. So the cool thing is if you are repeatable, scalable, and profitable, that implies that you actually have you've created a cash-generating machine in your business where you can put in $1 and get back several more dollars a few years later. So it makes a great investment tool. And this is what growth investors really look for and love. And that changes, again, who you're talking to and the kind of valuations you'll see there. So the number one mistake we see with this is that people try to force progress. Board members, investors, advisors, all want to have things happening quickly. So you try to force progress by jumping ahead before you complete the current phase. So common variations of that, I've made this mistake myself, is you build the product before you talk to enough customers, and then you get out and discover, well, that was a mistake because we've built the wrong thing, or we need to build other things here. Or a very common one is hiring salespeople before the founders have proven that they know how to sell the product. And so there's no playbook for them to work with at all, and they're not going to be effective for you. Another one is scaling the sales process before you've proven that it's actually a repeatable process. And another one is scaling sales before you fix the churn problem. So you're really just creating a leaky bucket and expanding that, and that's not a smart thing to do. And all of these, you'll find, will burn your cash and shorten the runway that you have available to you. So one of the other lessons we've learned with this is that it's not at all predictable how long it will take you to find product market fit or how long it will take you to find a repeatable and scalable sales process. So that leads me to a very important other step here, which is to strongly advise you to keep your cash burn very low while you are in the search for both product market fit and finding a repeatable and scalable sales process. Because you have no idea how long it will take. Despite what your business plan says, ignore that and remember that it's not predictable here. However, once you do find the scalable process here, it's time to turn the switch on and start scaling the business. And it turns out that actually that switch in mentality is such a drastic switch that many founders get it wrong. And I remember the very funny HubSpot board meeting that we had when we told the management team that they were ready to hit the scaling button and needed to start hiring 2 salespeople every month. And they really sat there and said, well, are you really sure about this? We've been trying to save money. We've been trying to save money. And they took them a while to get used to the idea that, no, this is a big switch when you hit this point here. So many fail to make that jump there appropriately. So what you have here is a 9-step model. And I'm going to walk through these in a little bit more detail and with as much time as I have here. And the key thing is to use these steps to prioritize what actions you're doing and avoid jumping ahead. So let's jump into this, this thing here, the idea of a repeatable and scalable growth model, the key sign that you're getting there is that you have growing bookings on a quarter-to-quarter basis. And I do not mean revenue or your ARR, annual recurring revenue. I mean bookings. And so in the SaaS world, bookings is your net new ARR. And it turns out that if you don't have growing bookings, you will still have growth in your business if you're in a recurring revenue business, but it will be a flat kind of growth. And what we're really looking for is exponential growth, which shows that you really know how to step up the rate at which you're growing by increasing bookings there. So when you start working on this, you won't have a clear path of how to sell. But by the end of this process, what you will have is a very well understood path that you can apply and teach to other people to keep you growing. And what we're trying to learn as we figure out this path is things like, which target market should we be selling to? Who in the organization do we call on? What message do we use? What pain and specific use case are we addressing? What's our sales motion? What pricing do we use? What new product features do we have? So these are all parts of this journey to getting a well-defined path there. And you might be asking yourselves the question, well, where do I start with this? Well, I think where we have to start is the first step of trying to make it repeatable. Just focus on repeatability here. And in order to do that, we have to come up with a sales motion for taking people that are strangers and converting them into customers. And if we're in a recurring revenue business, it's super important that we make them successful and turn them into promoters so we can get the benefit of recurring revenue. So we have to design a funnel. And the funnel works by taking our strangers and converting them into visitors to our website, then converting them into leads, then closing those into customers, and then delighting our customers and turning them into promoters. And that requires us to come up with 4 funnel stages here: a top of funnel design, a middle of funnel design, a sales stage, and a customer success stage to go through that. And our ideal sales staffing is really important. At this stage here, the key mistake I see is that people don't realize it's the founders who have to be doing the selling work, because only the founders have the ability to deal with the feedback that's coming in from these early customer calls and recognize the patterns and the changes that they have to make to the business to get to fix that. However, what you can do is add in what I call a Pathfinder trailblazer salesperson. And this is a special kind of a salesperson. Ordinary salespeople follow a playbook, and really you want them to follow that playbook and not invent outside of it, because by the end of this process you will have spent a lot of money developing your playbook, so you don't want them varying from it. A Pathfinder trailblazer salesperson helps you define that playbook. They help you answer these questions that we talked about earlier on, about who to call on, what message, what pricing, etc. So once you've hired that team, I recommend kicking up an initial lead source. Most often we see people firing up search engine marketing, maybe using an agency to start a lead flow going. And we've learned something really interesting here, which is that typically you need at least 50 real buyer conversations to have hit the point where you can start to see patterns emerge about which segments are the best segments to sell to and which use cases to go for. And here's one of the hardest steps that I see founders struggling with the whole time. You need to pick a single target market. This is really tough because you may have lots of places where you can make money, but you cannot, when you have small resources in your product team, build product for multiple different use cases. So you have to find and focus on a single one. And you also need to find a single use case inside of that target market as well, because the business messaging and the business products needed are different per use case. And here's a comment from Brian Halligan. As a board member, we were very frustrated with HubSpot. They had 2 founders there. One founder loved the very small business, the other one loved the mid-sized business, and we could not get them to focus in on a single one of them until about 2 years later. So Brian Halligan wrote that in the early days of HubSpot, we couldn't decide which target persona to go after. We argued about it for years. By not deciding, our marketing team had to serve multiple personas. Our product team had to serve multiple personas. Our services team had to create multiple offerings. But once we finally focused on one persona, everyone could focus on attracting and delighting that person. So it was a critical unlock at HubSpot that allowed us to make progress there. And that will result in you coming up with something called an ICP, an ideal customer profile, that tells you who you're targeting, which makes it much easier for marketing to go after that type of person. Plus, you'll also know who not to target for the negative characteristics. And that makes it super easy now to define your messaging. And here we see another common fault that I've made, and we all have made, I think, as product people. We love our product, so we want to talk about our product and our product's features. It turns out the customers don't care about your product. So this is the best quote to illustrate that. People don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. So we need to think about the whole. That means the customer's problem and the customer's business benefit, and change our messaging so that it talks about that, not about our drill. And that's an interesting step that is often a challenge for founding teams to go through. So once we have that, we should look at how do we exit from this phase here. So the criteria for this is that you've been able to successfully sell to multiple customers, and those customers are actually happy and getting the business benefit that you promised that they would get. And you've done this using a repeatable motion, so you know how to generate leads and what to do with each lead, what the conversation looks like, who you call on, what price you charge, things like that. And you think you're now ready to teach that to another salesperson. So one of the commonest mistakes that we see here is that people hire ordinary salespeople and try to get them to execute this first phase, and it doesn't work at all. So next, we do want to hire some ordinary salespeople because we're now ready to do that. And we want to prove that non-founders can actually execute the same motion that we just went through here. And so we will hire 2 very standard sales reps, is my recommendation at this stage, and change the way things are working. Now here, the founder has to change their role. Instead of going out and selling, they become people who are in charge of hiring to hire these salespeople, and then managing and onboarding and training and coaching these sales reps to get them to be productive, and building the sales tools that they might need to help them be productive then. And your exit criteria is that you've got 1 salesperson, at least, hopefully both of them, fully productive and selling comfortably and repeatably using that motion that you came up with there. And your customers are still happy as a result of the product that they bought from you. So a common mistake here is that the founders get so frustrated when they watch this poor sales rep bungling the sales call that they jump in and take sales over again. That's a mistake. You're trying to actually get out of the process and prove that you can actually make ordinary people successful at scaling. So then what we do is start scaling that, and we do that typically, I think, by hiring people in pairs, because there's a risk always that one person may not be successful. So you hire another 2 people, get them successful, hire another 2 people, and get them successful. And that leads me to the question to ask you, which is, how do we drive bookings? Well, it turns out that when you use salespeople, there is a limit to how many customers each salesperson can interact with. So there's a kind of a step function that restricts how fast your bookings can grow, and that's how many salespeople you have. So the math that defines your bookings here is how many salespeople you have multiplied by the productivity per rep. And that, if we look at each of these in turn, one of the most common mistakes I see companies make is they fail to hire enough salespeople at this stage. And normally, as founders, you're very comfortable when you don't hire on time because, hey, you're saving some money. But this turns out to be the one case where you cannot afford to be late with your hiring. And this leads me to one of the big discoveries I made about 2 or 3 years ago, which is, in order to be successful these days, you have to become really great at recruiting. So I have this blog post, recruiting is the 3rd crucial startup skill. And you need to bring recruiting in-house to become successful at it. And that will allow you also to address the second variable, which is productivity per rep, because it turns out that that is driven very strongly by the quality of sales rep you're able to attract. And if you don't have great recruiting, you will have problems with that. But also, the importance of hiring these people is not alone. You must then put the energy and effort into onboarding and training them after you've brought them into the company for you. Well, it turns out that it's no good to hire sales reps if you don't have enough leads to feed them. So one of the problems that you have to crack at the scalable phase here is, how do you create scalable lead sources? And what we've seen is typically lead sources tend to top out, so you have to keep searching for additional lead sources. The one that doesn't top out is inbound marketing, but the problem with inbound marketing is it's a very slow ramp in the early days. So you probably want to start that in the early days, but keep expanding over time. And that leads me to the fact that when you're going through this phase here, your staffing will add some additional people. So you're going to have some recruiting people, people to do customer success to keep your customers happy, and also you're going to want to have people in the marketing place that can work on scaling your lead sources for you. So I guess they have somehow or another jumped my slides to the point where I can no longer see them, which may possibly mean that I've gone beyond my time limit. But is anybody able to help me get my slides back up? Okay, without the slides, let me talk about the second phases here. So the last thing I want to mention is that as you start scaling, we typically see, all right, we're out of time. But thank you very much indeed for listening. It was a pleasure talking to you.